Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Exceed High Performance podcast. Today, we're joined by Steve Roest, who is CEO and co-founder of PocDoc. With his relentless drive and energy, Steve is really taking on the healthcare diagnostics industry. In addition to that, Steve has his own podcast and also is founder of the Friday Club that is really designed to support young entrepreneurs as they enter their career. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
It's great to be here. It's a lovely studio.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
nice.
you.
Yeah, you guys put on a good show.
We do.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, in this podcast, what we're really doing is wanting to delve under the skin of people who are, very much exhibiting high performance. And, if you don't mind me saying, I think, we've seen that plenty from...
It's an honor to be included in that group. I know there's a lot of people that you've either spoken to or will speak to on this podcast who are pretty awesome. So it's an honor to be here.
Cool. What we'd like to do, if you don't mind, even before we kind of get into PocDoc, is really start to understand your upbringing, where you've come from. You really just as a sort of indicator of why you do what you do,
Sure.
how you've become what you've done. And I guess one of the stories that I know about you is you were a state-educated student. You went to Oxford University. Year one, you absolutely sort of struggled, I think. You were told to quit.
Yeah.
But then there was a rapid turnaround of that performance. And I think you graduated a few years later with a first. And I'm just really interested in that initial experience and what that taught you and where that kind of turnaround came from.
It was a first with distinction, but that's minor. That's minor.
All right.
So I grew up in the kind of the borderlands between Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire in a village of like 900 people with a school that had 90 kids, and all the kids went to the same school, and all the kids sort of went to the same follow-on schools. So it was very, running around, huge amounts of freedom in the woods, running around, all that kind of idyllic type small village thing. And then my secondary school was a horrible state school in a really deprived area of a town called Aylesbury. And it was super difficult for me. I really didn't want to go there. I found school really challenging, not from an academic perspective, but more from a cultural perspective. I just didn't really fit in that particular school. And so a lot of that journey at school was extremely confrontational for me in lots of different ways. And then when I was 14, my dad had a huge stroke. So when my dad was about the same age I am now, he had a huge stroke due to undiagnosed cardiovascular disease. And he was in the Chelsea and Westminster for months, couldn't walk for over a year. All kinds of very traumatic things happened. And so from that sort of point onwards, my sister and I had a huge amount of independence because my mum was looking after my dad. And all of those things together sort of created, I guess, a bit of an FU type of attitude, in me, and a sort of resilience where from 14, we had to figure out quite a bit of stuff that maybe other 14-year-olds didn't have to figure out. I mean, obviously some do, but that was sort of thrust upon us. And then I was so over school by the time I was leaving. I was just desperate to go and do something else and leave that institution that had sort of incarcerated me for 6 years. And so
Steve, what was it about the culture of the school?
So
that didn't align?
Yeah, so first of all, it was all boys, which I just didn't get on with. I what had happened was I'd gone to a different school for the first year, for year 7, and I loved it. And that was where all my mates from the village school had gone, and it was mixed, and it was much more more of like a liberal arts type of school. My parents didn't really like the educational standards there, so they moved me to another one, and that was an all boys school. Super strict, loads of really odd, slightly bizarre rules and regulations, very conformist. The way I like, I mean, there are lots of really good teachers there. There were lots of really horrible teachers there. There's a huge amount of drugs and alcohol and violence in the school, outside the school. It wasn't the worst school, but it was certainly a challenging environment. And the interactions that I had with some of the teachers were just extremely confrontational. And I didn't really understand why. I kept on asking why we were doing things and why things were the way they were, and why couldn't we do things differently, and sort of why didn't we have certain freedoms that we weren't being allowed, and why would we sort of treated certain ways. And I felt like there was a large amount of what I achieved was due to wanting to prove them wrong, not necessarily because they were encouraging a school that was full of sort of growth and support. So, I mean, I'm sure they might remember it differently, and they probably think I was an absolute idiot and really difficult to deal with. Which, you know, and there were a lot of good teachers. Yeah, there were a lot. You know, and I was lucky. There were a few teachers that I really got on with and supported me. So it wasn't all bad. But then when
can I ask as well, was it your parents who had almost fostered in you that kind of desire to question, challenge, not just accept?
Not really. I mean, not really at all. No. I just grew up that way. Okay. I just sort of, I think I just had that mentality where I just wanted to get into things and understand why things were the way they were. And I always had a sort of an energy that I wanted to keep moving. And then when my dad had his stroke, I've only started to realize this later in life, but I think at the time, that was such a traumatic event for all of us that it really flicked a switch. Where I was like, right, well, the bus might come around the corner any old time. So why don't we just try this? And why don't we do this? And what's the downside? And a lot of the time in the school that a lot of the stuff that I did independently, which was what got me into Oxford ultimately, and what sort of led on to a lot of different things, was done completely outside the school environment, completely off my own back. And when some of the teachers had found out that I'd gone off and done these things, you know, I was like bullied in front of the class, mocked by the teachers in front of the other kids, you know, singled out, that type of thing for being different. I just felt like that school, again, not to say anything, they were very conformist, and they weren't really interested in kids that were different. So, so anyway, so I ended up at Oxford, which was great. But I didn't really, the difference between the level of education I'd received at my state school and Oxford was vast.
What did you go and study at Oxford?
German and linguistics.
All right.
So it was vast. I mean, it was the only time I think in my life where I've really stuck my head in the sand as opposed to dealing with it. Instead of knuckling down and cracking on, there was so much other distractions that were super fun, so much freedom suddenly from this sort of really austere, constrained environment. That I went the other way, you know, and sort of ignored it, stuck my head in the sand, hoped it would be okay, but I kind of deep down knew it just really wouldn't. And then paid the massive price at the end of the first year, which is probably one of the most humiliating things I've ever encountered.
What price? What do you mean?
I failed my first year exams.
Okay.
By a wide margin.
Okay.
I mean, there were exams where I got a 0 because I didn't know I had that subject. I hadn't turned up to anything for the whole year because I didn't know I had that subject. So personal accountability, like, it was my fault completely. And, you know, all your mates basically pass. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's this thing with Kevin Hart where he talks about how he messed up his SATs because he wanted to go to the water park trip with his high school mates. And so he just guessed his SATs because it's multiple choice because he wanted to get quickly to get the bus to go to the water park. Kind of felt a bit like that. And all my mates like smashed it. And then I was the one in the library over the summer, which, and obviously that whole process is kind of made to be humiliating. You know what I mean? They sort of, it's supposed to try and make sure you don't end up in that situation again. So that was pretty rough.
So what was the switch that you flicked at the end of so you get to the end of the summer, you take the exams, you didn't turn up to summer, and you failed miserably. Yeah. Why did you just not go, fuck it? Why not? Well,
so it's good. I didn't know we could swear on this thing, but that's good.
Forgive me.
That's fine for me. I didn't know. On my one, we can't swear, but that's because it goes out on the radio.
Please edit that.
No, it's all right.
You've told him he can challenge the status quo, and now all of a sudden, you know.
So what happened was really, I went out and I spoke to some people, and like my dad, and you know my tutors and my mates from home, and pretty much the universal view was that, no, you're not Oxford material, mate. Like, you need to quit. Like, you should quit. Wow. My dad told me to quit. Like, everyone was like, nah, like, you tried, like, well done you gave it a go, we're proud you got there, but maybe you need to just like knock your aspirations down a bit. I was like, I went through a real soul searching thing. I went to visit other unis. Like, I got another offer from Durham because I took it seriously because I was like, there's a good chance I'm not gonna, I mean, it wasn't a close thing, me failing my first year. It was about as bad as it could have been. So I sort of had a backup plan, but then I realized that I wouldn't really ever forgive myself if I didn't actually try. and really, really try, and then the chips will fall where they may. And I also wanted to prove people wrong. That's always been a huge motivation for me, is like being consistently underestimated and wanting to prove people wrong. And I realized probably around that time, this was also in school, I was able to sort of manipulate my own mentality into creating people that I could sort of create something that made it seem like someone was telling me I couldn't do something, to sort of artificially manufacture a mentality of wanting to prove somebody wrong. And that creates a huge amount of fuel and drive for me, and always has done. So yeah, I wanted to kind of prove to people that I wasn't this gigantic like idiot that had just blown his chance. And I got through it, and then everything was there. I ended up with like one of the best degrees in the college at that time. I'm the only person in living memory at the college that failed their first year and got a first.
Oh, really?
It's like, I've got this note from the head tutor, a written note in fountain pen, because he was one of the guys that wanted to kick me out. And he to be fair, he just wrote, "What a transformation." And that was he wrote this super sweet note after finals.
Did you keep that?
Yeah, I got it. It was really cool.
Yeah. And that kind of turnaround, was that pure sort of discipline, rigor, focus, graft?
It was choice.
Yeah. Okay.
It was choices.
Yeah.
It was and again, and that comes through everything that I've done since, is an understanding, because I think when you go to school, there's an element where you're still not quite conscious about what's happening. I don't think you're necessarily completely conscious about all of the choices that you make, you're not consciously choosing sometimes to do your homework. You just sort of do it because it's sort of what you have to do, sort of thing. But then I realized when, I think probably as soon as the thing happened with my dad, I was like, right, so there isn't really a master plan here. Like anything could happen. And the power of choices that I can make are actually, there's no backup team. There's no one on the bench that's coming to save Steve. Like you're on your own. You got to figure this out for yourself. You're a sum of the choices that you make or don't make. And that's what I realized. And that's kind of become something that I constantly return to. Like you actually have a lot of choice, and what happens is a result of the choices that you make. And you're the one that has to go to sleep at night comfortable.
I also love the way that you framed it with accountability. Yeah. So complete accountability, my fault.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I also think that if I think about what we're doing at PocDoc and what I'm doing with the Last Friday Club around this innovation space, one of the biggest things that I hear, so my background is not in health, but I've been doing PocDoc for a few years. And I come from sort of a VC-backed tech, highly competitive, hyper-growth kind of environment. And it's understood and expected that competition is hard, and not everyone wants to buy your product, and you have to compete. You have to be active and proactive. I think the biggest thing that I see around accountability, particularly in the innovation space, is there's sort of, because the NHS is a public institution, innovators have an expectation that the NHS should buy their product because it is innovative. And they sort of bypass this accountability around, well, have you worked out what the customer wants? Does your product actually solve that issue? Is it priced properly? Have you marketed it properly? Have you got the right clinical approvals? All these different things. And they kind of short circuit to be like, well, I'm a scientist and I'm an expert in this field and I've built this thing and my tech's really great. And it's an absolute travesty that they're not buying it. So a lot of what I talk to people about is like, well, how much have you actually worked out that there is a real customer problem that you're solving? Like not just built a really cool piece of tech, but does it actually solve a problem that they'll actually pay you for?
How do you do that? How do you know what the audience wants, the customer wants? How do you?
It's a real process, right? And you have to your point earlier a little bit, you have to kind of really have the right mindset for it and really want to listen. Like really want to listen to like hug the cactus, right? Because a lot of it in the initial is really bad and horrible.
Hug the cactus.
You got to be like, people are going to throw rocks at you and say nasty things about your work and say you're an idiot. And, you have to sort of accept that and be like, but if I did it like this, or but don't you do that? And like, like I heard that you do it like that, so why can't, if I did it like that, would that work? And under what circumstances? And could we do it like this? You have to be very, very, very mentally flexible, and also willing to engage in that sort of, I guess, mental jujitsu to try and puzzle around it. And I think a lot of innovators, particularly with an academic background, their whole value system is about not being wrong.
Yeah.
That's how they get built up, you know, academic papers and winning academic arguments, and that's how they work. It's really difficult for them to demonstrate the mental agility around that. In my experience, having done this last Friday Club and tried to be a sort of force of positivity in the industry to bring a bit of realism in, because the thing I get frustrated about is people keep saying how bad the NHS is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's really bad at innovation. It's really bad at innovation. It doesn't do anything. It's and that's not actually true. What they're really saying is, it should buy my thing. Is really what they're. I'm annoyed that they're not buying my thing. It's not the same thing. And it just adopts innovation every day of every week of every week of the year.
Yeah.
Just maybe not your thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And Steve, so tell me, how did PocDoc come about? Because as you say, you didn't start off in the health tech industry at all.
I did not. So my dad that I mentioned had this huge stroke due to undiagnosed cardiovascular disease. So I was really familiar with the disease area, right? Really familiar with the personal pain and suffering around it. And so that was always there in my sort of backstory, if you like, sort of on the back burner, if you like, on standby. And then my wife is a scientist, and she'd found another scientist, and they were working on a research paper around how could you use smartphone technology to do quantitative blood testing, like hypothetically speaking. Because if you could effectively leverage the big advances in smartphone technology, image analysis, combine it with applied AI, you could, in theory, reduce costs 100x, increase speed 100x, increase access, really focused around chronic diseases, where the issue with chronic diseases and prevention is that to prevent a meaningful number of people getting it, you need to test a really large number of people because of the funnel sort of mechanics of it. So they were working on this research paper. I sort of reached a point in my career where I'd done really well with other VC-backed businesses and was in a position to look at other opportunities. And I sort of sat down and started paying more attention, because I was initially worried because my wife was having all these late night phone calls with a guy called Vlad. And I was like, who is this guy that we're on the phone to at 11 o'clock at night? And it turned out it was Dr. Vlad Gubala, who's a 25-year expert, 25-year veteran in point-of-care diagnostics, one of the most highly cited authors in the space. And I was like, guys, look, the reality is, if you publish this research paper, someone's going to start your company.
Oh, wow.
So why don't we just start the company?
Yeah.
And that's how it came to be. And it was a really good thing from the beginning, because we had myself from a digital tech commercial background, and we had two really strong scientific founders, which created a really, really strong foundation for the business. Gave a lot of investors a lot of confidence that we were covered on the scientific creds as well as covered on the commercial creds.
How did it land? Was it successful straight away? Was there an impact?
Well, so we had 2.5 years where we had to make the product.
Right.
So so you go through 2.5 years of this sort of like medical technology. They call it the Valley of Death, right? Where like you keep going, you're building it from scratch, you're building it from scratch, you're building it from scratch. You need to reach the end before, it's a bit like crossing a lake that's frozen over, and you just hope the ice keeps going till the end. And so we got there really luckily with the support of some great investors, and we built the product. And then as soon as, in that 2.5 years, actually even before we started the product, one of the things that a lot of medical device innovators don't do is spend a lot of time with their customers or potential customers before they start.
Yeah.
And that's because they're very innovation focused, which is fine, but they're very excited about the science, and then we'll get going with the science. We didn't put a spade in the ground until we'd spent about 100 to 200 hours with patients and clinicians, really trying to understand this disease space, really going in and hugging all the cacti, really trying to uncover all of the dead bodies that might be around, about the pitfalls and the bear traps. And so we really knew. So for example, one of our early theses that got completely destroyed was that this might be something that GPs would purchase. And it got completely destroyed at the point where we'd spoke to a GP who, for the first time, told us that GPs don't pay for lab tests. Yeah. So under the NHS, all of that lab testing when you go to the GP is all completely free for the GP. Okay. So why would they ever buy a point of care? Why would they do that? Yeah. What's crazy is I still see people talking to me on LinkedIn in the last Friday Club who still say, oh, my GP is going to buy my test. And that's there. And I'm like, you've actually got a product, and you still haven't had the conversation with a GP who's told you that they won't. Yeah. Like they're just, or they've said that to you, but you don't believe them. because you're not listening properly. So that's a really good example. So during the whole Valley of Death, I was completely pushing a lot of the commercial work going on. So we worked with the Bill Gates Foundation. We adapted our technology to work with the UK government during COVID. We were really, really scrappy around that commercial piece of it, so that we'd already got some acceptance around the sort of modules of our tech, if you like. So we'd sort of prepped the market. And then we started off with a bang. We secured a really massive NHS contract up in the Northeast. So the Northeast is a real hotbed of cardiovascular disease prevention as well as innovation. And we also took another approach. I was always looking for like non-standard ways to have non-linear growth, or to do things in a non-linear way. And one of those things was like, well, you know, almost every single health tech business bases itself in London and focuses on the South. So we didn't. We based ourselves north of Cambridge, and we focused on the Midlands and the North.
Can I ask, did you ever get it wrong?
Oh, like, I mean, there's been loads of missteps along the way. There were loads of things that didn't work out, right?
Yeah.
Particularly in that product development, that you try 1,000 things to get to the one thing that works.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've built manufacturing capability in the UK. So we built our own factory from scratch to make our product, because we're the only ones that know how to make it, and we wanted to keep that IP. So within that, I mean, there's been loads of missteps and things that didn't work, and problems and issues. And I guess it's a bit like the kind of Stoic philosophy, you know, you know, the obstacle is the way, you know, the way is the path. And it's not about avoiding problems, particularly not when you have a startup, or if you're trying to do anything challenging, sport or anything. It's not about, success is not about avoiding problems, because there's going to be problems all the time. You're going to get injured, the race is going to get cancelled, something's going to happen. It doesn't really matter. And if you set your bar as, oh my gosh, we only succeed if we avoid problems, then you're probably going to be very disappointed.
Did you ever doubt in responding to that whole entire process of moving forward, you know, attacking the obstacles?
I have a really high level of resilience, personal resilience, when I'm focused on something. But even when we were in the depths of sort of like, you know, I guess it took us 2.5 years to finish the product. When you've already gone through a year and you're like, I've got another year and a half, you know, that's a bit tough. That's pretty tough, you know, and the product at a year and a half wasn't really anywhere. You know, that was pretty hard.
It's time, it's
and it's belief, right? Because you're creating science from scratch, and I'm not a scientist, so I rely on a team of people to do that, and that's a huge amount of faith and trust. Whereas, you know, if I was running a different business that I knew a lot more about what was happening, then it wouldn't have required that. So that was a big learning for me, to be able to place all of this faith in highly technical teams to deliver on this
I'm really interested in that, because so this is the Exceed High Performance podcast, right? Sure. And I'm really fascinated in trying to help bring to life principles, tools, techniques, strategies for people, anybody out there listening, how to actively respond when we encounter doubt.
Sure.
What are a couple of things, you know, after a year and a half?
So the things, I mean, I'm a voracious reader. You know, I read, and I'm really interested in learning about how to be better, which is a bit broad, but I think that's a big thing, which is there's lots of things out there that you can read. So I fell into Stoicism through the Ryan Holiday book, Obstacle is the Way. I read that, and then I went to the source material. So I read Meditations by what's his name? I can't remember, the emperor, the guy that he quotes all the time, the founder of Stoicism. I'll remember it in a minute. Then I read Zeno, and I kind of followed the path. And so the Stoicism mentality really chimed for me around this, like how instead of trying to avoid problems, if you have a fundamental belief that problems will happen, it's about how do you find the opportunity in them. And my whole previous career was always in and around high growth startups, which is super stressful. There's always 100 problems. There's always more issues to deal with. So I'd sort of like baked into my mentality that there was always going to be issues to deal with. Sometimes more serious, but I would say this confidently. In my whole career, there's never been a problem where there wasn't an upside somewhere. Maybe a tiny one, but there is always something somewhere if you can take a step back and you can try and look at it. So that's the first thing. The second thing that's really worked for me in and around the doubt space is to build up a network of kind of whether you want to call them senseis or mentors or trusted brokers or whatever your phrase is that you can try and turn to in those instances. And you can be like, you can have a kind of upfront and honest conversation. Now, that may not be your investors in a business because that may be difficult, right? But there will be people out there, mum, dad, brother, sister, friend, whatever. You have to try and figure out who you can actually go to when you want to talk, because if you can't, talking about the problem is really, really helpful. And like, I mean, I had this the other day, like I went through a real period of like negative self-talk and you know, lots of doubts about lots of different things. And I wrote it down and then I talked to somebody about it. And it was like, well, you wouldn't say those things to your friend, right? Or what would you say to your friend if your friend said that? So stuff like that, techniques like that, I think are really helpful. I find physical exercise really helpful. You know, like just getting out there and doing something different. What are the other things that have been really, really helpful? Finding value outside of work, like finding something that creates personal value for you, so that you have something in your mentality to be like, well, that might be going to absolute crap, okay?
But I've got
something that I can invest my time in where I can see that I'm making progress.
And what was that for you?
Oh, it's a series of things. So I started off, it was long distance cycling. So I did a stage of the Tour de France.
Oh, wow.
And then it became like Ironman for a while.
Yeah.
And then I had, well, my wife had 3 children, which put a bit of a dent in the old international sporting ambitions, and we had a startup. But now the recent thing is I've started doing jiu-jitsu. So I've got into my 40s and I wanted to build up my physical strength again, more muscle mass. And one of my mates he's like a ninja. And, you know, I've always been into sort of physical sports and stuff like that. So he showed me some stuff and I didn't realize how powerless I was. He sort of, it was ridiculous. Like, oh my God, within seconds, it was
with
ridiculous.
One finger.
Yeah, no, literally. And then, and it's really, really hard. So I like hard things. So I'm now doing that and I'm trying to get my target for this year is a blue belt. Oh, the other technique I did do the whole time, which is really helpful, is goal setting.
Yeah.
So really clearly over whatever time frame you want to do it, really proactively setting some goals, personal, private, work, however you want to split it up, so that you can demonstrate progress to yourself. Because progress to yourself actually increases, I find, your positivity around everything. Now, not everyone's a goal setter, so I appreciate that, but that really worked for me.
And
Progress doesn't have to just be outcome, right?
No, exactly. But that's why I love.
process.
So that's why I like jiu-jitsu, right? Because you have to do 2 years between getting a belt.
Yeah.
It's like a 2-year thing.
It's a process.
Exactly. You have to
fall
really.
in love with.
It's not like, oh, I'm going to train for 3 months and do a triathlon.
Yeah.
It's you got to really embed yourself in it.
And the thing I'm interested in, Steve, because we're talking a lot about you as an individual, and clearly, you know, there's something in your DNA which is about sort of, you know, being able to be resilient, to sort of have that drive. But now you are a leader in a company. So how do you ensure that culture, that focus that you have permeates across the team?
I think it's a really interesting question because what works for you as an individual doesn't necessarily always translate into a team environment, right? Like you could be a complete maniac, but it doesn't mean that trying to make other people reach that level is going to work for the harmony of it. And so when I was earlier on in my career, my expectation was that people would be like I was. You know, not when I was a CEO, but when I was a senior leader in some other businesses. And that didn't work out very well because everyone's different. And, you know, I've got some certain unique characteristics that not everyone is sort of okay with being that way. And so I think what I've tried to do, I mean, you have to talk to people at the company, but what I've tried to do at the company is lead from the front. So I'll work how I want to work. Right. I'll do what I want to do and work in the way that I want to work. And I'll let everybody else sort of figure out their own working patterns. We've always been really good, I think, about setting priorities at a company level and sharing priorities. So everybody in the company knows what everybody's working on. Everybody agrees and sort of signs off what we're all trying to work towards. So, you know, we don't have to chase everybody or micromanage anybody or anything like that. I personally think that in earlier stage businesses, it's good for people to see that the leaders are willing to really, like, you know, put some sacrifice on the table and work really, really hard. So I don't know, but it's really hard because you obviously want people to, I mean, it's my business, so I'll work. My expectation is I'll work harder than most.
Yeah.
Because I've got more at stake, you know. But you obviously want people to work as hard as possible, but you definitely don't want people to feel burnt out or to not feel supported or to feel under pressure. And I definitely don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, if I don't work that hard, then something bad's going to happen. That's not it. But on the flip side, you do have to create a high performance culture where people care, where people really care about hitting those things. But what I've learned over the years is that you can't enforce that on people. That has to come organically. They have to want to do that, because otherwise it's
and
really...
how do you unlock that though? How do you unlock that care?
So we did it in a few ways. So one, we have a really super clear mission at a top level that we're all trying to work towards. And obviously there have been people that have unfortunately left the business that weren't quite vibing with that mission, as you know, there's turnover. But the people that we've got now really understand the mission, feel deeply about that mission. And then in every group, understanding on a sort of quarterly or half yearly basis, what are the big things I'm trying to achieve? So I'll give you an example. So in our manufacturing, 18 months ago, we had a argument that we would never be able to make more than, I don't know, 1,000 a month. Okay, we have the capacity now of 300,000 within 18 months. So we've grown it 300x through mentality changes. We haven't invested anything else in CapEx, haven't bought any new equipment. We don't have any more people, just real understanding everything and trying to break down mentalities of why we can't do things and why certain things can't happen. And that was led by that team. I sort of said, look, you need to figure out a way to get to this point, and here's the reasons why. I also believe in a culture that's comfortable with polite conflict. I think conflict is good.
One more time, polite conflict.
Yeah, as in like not like yelling at people and being rude, but saying like, well, I don't think you're right. I think that's okay, you know, or like, I don't think that that's good enough. I think that that's okay. And that should come.
And even if that's you, or especially if it's you as the leader. Yeah.
Or I'd prefer it if it wasn't me, you know, because I think that like, if you look at some of the, I mean, I've not been on the inside of some of those teams, but if you look at like the World Cup winning teams, the Clive Woodward type teams, they create accountability below him. Right, it's not Clive yelling at people. You know, it's those guys, and that's where I think that we sort of wanted it to get to, which it really has. I mean, you have some bumps on the road and things like that, but that's been really, really critical, because you can't, building a company is like it's a village or a town. You can't be just sort of dictating everything to everybody all the time. You have to create some sort of framework and mutual drive and pride to hit certain objectives.
And I know, Steve, we could literally keep talking, because there's so many topics that you've touched on, but I'm conscious, you know, of time. I guess if there was a final message that you were going to give to anyone who is perhaps looking to start their own company, or even just simply kind of step up their level of performance, you know, what would be your kind of key takeaways for people?
So I would say, like, one, work out what your goals are. Like, go really take some time with it. Work out what your personal goals are, or if you want to start the company, work that really out, and then take the leap. I don't think that there's any downside really in taking a leap of faith and having a go. And then you just work really hard. I mean, there's not a lot of secret sauce to it. You know, like, you have to work out what you want to do and then be prepared to work really, really hard at it. Like, there isn't any sportsman on the planet or any business person that's been successful, or any mother or father or any role you want to think about that's been successful, that hasn't worked hard. So that's kind of baked into it. And then the other thing I would say is, try and figure out what works for you in terms of self-improvement. Is it reading? Is it exercise? Is it both? And really try and take some time to figure out that piece of it. And otherwise, just have a go. Just really go for it.
Excellent. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. And
thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me on. Thanks a lot. Much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Steve.